Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido and today it is the Olivine Raiders going up against the Cinnabar Blazes, and as they look at their opening hands of their best of 3 series, let's have a look at this tale of the tape where the Raiders are having a near perfect start to their season. They are yet to drop a series at all as they sit firmly on top of the leaderboard, but this will be their biggest challenge to date as the Cinnabar Blazes do have a firm type advantage and they want to capitalize on that. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the metal decks? Will it be the fire decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And having flipped heads and going first, it will be that Fire Spit Island with their own Heatran going into the active spot. It will be that Dialga from the Eternal Time deck of the Olivine Raiders going into their active spot as we go into turn 1. And as we said, this is a best of 3 series, but regardless of the outcome, all 3 matches will be played because they all count towards the leaderboard. As the Pokeball is played by the Blazers, they get their second Heatran and they follow it up with the Professor's Research. They get a Rocky Helmet and they get the Cyrus. We can see a Ninetales and a Magmortar in their hand, as well as they do put the second Heatran on the bench. They move the Rocky Helmet onto that active Heatran. Now they can't generate an energy on the first turn, so they do send it over to the Raiders, who pull their own Rocky Helmet and play their own Pokeball. So they're also going to get a basic Pokemon. They get a Bronzor though. They don't get the second Dialga, as they get a first energy onto Dialga and move their Rocky Helmet onto it, trying to make the Blazers not want to do any damage, as they do have that fire type advantage over these metal decks, except for that Skarmory that is in the Stark Mountain deck. But they send it back over to the Blazers, who pull their Vulpix, and as we said, that Ninetales is in hand. Unfortunately for them, this Heatran only requires 2 energy, so it can get the first one for this Raging Mad Strike that does 40 damage. But if Heatran has already taken damage, it will then do 80 damage, and they need to keep in mind that weakness advantage. As the Bastiodon is pulled for the Raiders, they get a second energy onto the Dialga, who has that Time Mash. It does require 3 energy to do 100 damage, and the Bronzong coming online with that Psychic for the Raiders. They send it back over to the Blazers though, who pull their second Magmortar, and they're thinking, and they are going to get that Ninetales online. They do take that time with that decision though. They don't want to make any rushed errors here in this matchup. This is a big opportunity. They could be the first team ever to take down the Olivine Raiders, whereas the Raiders are looking to go 5-0 to start their season. Ninetales though gets at first energy. They don't get a second energy onto the Heatran. They don't want to start doing damage with it here, but the Raiders, they do get a third energy for this Time Mash onto the Heatran. Clearly they're not concerned about the Rocky Helmet, which would have put Heatran into knockout range if they had gone on the offensive, but it is a tails being flipped for this Time Mash, so it won't be able to go for that in the coming turn. However, Heatran just needs a second energy here to capitalize on that Raging Mad Strike, and that is exactly what the Blazers are going to do. But they're also going to play that Pokemon Center Lady to restore 30 health. They've had it in hand the whole time, which means this Heatran will outlast that Rocky Helmet recall damage, but not before getting 100 damage and the first point in this game 1 against the Eternal Time deck. Now the Raiders only have this Bronzong, who does also require 3 energy for this Psychic. Now the Psychic does capitalize on the energy on the opposing Pokemon, but the Raiders have pulled their Armor Fossil. They've got the Bastiodon in hand. They still require the Shieldon, and they're thinking of getting an energy onto the Bronzong, but it can only outlast so many of those Raging Mad Strikes, so they change their direction and do move it to that Armor Fossil, as Bastiodon does require 3 energy as well. It is the second Pokeball being pulled for the Blazers, which they do play, and finally they have a Magma in hand. It is the Magmas that were only left. There's still a basic Magma in that deck as well, as they are going to opt to go with that onto that final benched position, and they do get a first energy onto it as they continue with these Raging Mad Strikes, 100 damage onto the Bronzong, who has only 20 health remaining. It is the second Bastiodon being pulled for the Raiders. They desperately need that Shieldon so they can capitalize on that Guarded Grill ability that they've been able to make the most of all season long. Now the Blazers have just pulled their Dawn, which does allow them to move an energy from the bench to their active Pokemon as they get a second energy onto that Magma, and they're continuing with these Raging Mad Strikes. This time it takes the Bronzong off the board, and it's only 1 point away from this Fire Spit Island deck taking game 1 over the Olivine Raiders. We've never seen the Raiders this backed into a corner, but it is only early stages being game 1. The Raiders do pull their Professor's Research that they do play immediately. They need the shield on. They get the Giant Cape and they get the shield on, so they can move that shield on into that active spot. It does have 100 health, but unfortunately that is not a good sign. However, they do have the Giant Cape, so that gets it up to 120 health, which means it can outlast a hit here from this Heatran. Unless they decide to go with the Headbutt, it will do 50 damage. They've got the Adamant in hand, but they've already played a Professor's Research, which is a supporter card. Only one of them can be used a turn. They go with the Headbutt. They can see the writing on the wall, it seems. Actually, I take that back because they have just wiped out that Heatran. However, they're clearly not thinking about that Ninetales that is on the bench. It can take out the Shieldon. However, they do go with the Magma, do the Blazes, and clearly they want to maximize the damage they can do here. They have this Magmortar in hand with that Bursting Inferno. It does 100 damage, so it is going to wipe this Shieldon off the board, but it does require 4th energy, so they play the Dawn. This does allow them to get an energy from that Ninetales, 4th energy onto the Magmortar now, and it can wipe this Shieldon off the board. The Raiders were never able to get the Bastiodon online. The burn doesn't matter because the Blazers have taken 3 points to only the Raiders 1 here in game 1. They have dominated this game 1. The Raiders need to bounce back though in this game 2. However, once again, it will be the Blazers flipping heads, allowing them to go first, and they have those 2 Heat Rotoms in hand with this Flint Lockwood deck, moving one of them into the active spot. And it is going to be the Raiders moving that Skarmory, who we did touch on earlier, into the active spot from this Stark Mountain deck. They've got the Magnemite, they move onto the bench, and they've also got a Magneton in hand. But here we go, game 2, as the Raiders are trying to pull this one back. The Blazers do pull a Rocky Helmet, and we can see this Professor's Research that they are going to play immediately, getting another 2 cards. They get a Dawn, they get the Macargo. They don't have a Slugma in hand yet, but they are going to move this Rocky Helmet onto the Heat Rotom. Now Skarmory, if it has a Pokemon tool attached to it, it does an additional 30 damage with those metal arms. Even though it has wings, it is called Metal Arms, otherwise it only does 20 damage, and the Magnezone has been pulled for the Raiders. They do play a Pokeball as well, allowing them to get their Heatran. They have a Heatran in this deck, so we won't be seeing them go head to head here in this series, but they do put it on the bench. The Giant Cape onto the Skarmory, so this Metal Arms, instead of doing 20 damage, will do 50, and it also gets the additional 20 health thanks to that Giant Cape, but 50 damage onto the Heat Rotom, leaving it with only 30 health remaining. That Rocky Helmet though does do the 20 recoil damage to offset that Giant Cape. The Sizzlipede has been pulled for the Blazers as well, and they are going to move that to the bench alongside that benched Heat Rotom. And the Blazers are actually going to start setting up the Heat Rotom the benched Heat Rotom instead of the active one, as it is easily going to be taken off this board by Skarmory. As the Raiders have their Professor's Research in hand, they are going to play that, and they are going to produce a second Magnemite and a second Magneton here. So they are going to get that Magnemite onto the bench as they get a Magneton onto the Magnemite that was already there. They're having a look at their Magnezone, who does require 3 energy, as does the Heatran here, who can do 110 damage, but it does get recoil damage in doing so. However, this Metal Arms, the Raiders will take the first point here in game 2. They need to take this one to ensure that they can bring this back in game 3. But as we said, regardless of the outcome of this matchup, that game 3 still takes place because it always counts towards the leaderboard. And the Blazers do move their second Heat Rotom into the active spot, but first they're going to play the Pokeball before they do anything else to get a second Sizzlipede in hand as well, which they immediately move on to the bench. They're keeping this bench nicely stocked as that Heat Rotom with the Heat Breath, if they can get the heads, it does an additional 30 damage, and unfortunately they don't get to capitalize on the weakness, but they don't need to worry about that because Skarmory only had 60 health remaining, so they still get the point back that they've lost. It's 1 point each in between these two sides, as the Raiders need to decide who they want to move into the active spot, and they're going with the Heatran. Again, that Steel Tackle can do 110 damage, but it requires 3 energy. The second Skarmory has been pulled, immediately going on the bench, as does that Magnezone. They haven't moved the Magneton onto the bench yet. They could empty their hand here, and that is exactly what they're going to do. There are no cards in hand for this Stark Mountain deck at the moment, as the Blazers pull their Giant Cape as well. and they are going to get a first energy onto one of those benched Sizzlopedes here. Continuing with this Heat Breath. Now this time Heatran is weak to the fire types. If they flip a heads, it can do 80 damage. And they get the heads as well. The Blazers getting those coin flips that they need, leaving Heatran with only 40 health remaining, but it is the Adamant now being pulled for the Olivine Raiders. If they play this, it will reduce damage that the Heatran takes by 20, but they're having a look as well at that Sizzlipede, who does only do 10, but again, with that weakness, it would get a boost. However, that Adamant would offset that. The Steel Tackle, they don't play the Adamant, they take the Heat Rotom off of the board. There is the recoil damage for the Heatran. They have made a crucial error here though, because if they played the Adamant, this Sizzlipede would not be able to take the Heatran off the board. The Blazers, they do pull the Slugma, and they've already got that Macargo in hand, so they immediately move the Slugma to the bench, getting a first energy onto that as well. But this could be a big mistake for the Raiders. This Gnaw will allow the Sizzlipede to eliminate the Heatran from this match. And because of that, the Raiders will not be able to get a third point in this turn. Instead they have to move one of their bench Pokemon into the active spot. They do choose to go with the Skarmory, who does not have a Pokemon tool on it. They do pull the second Magnezone. This could be costly for the Raiders to have not played that Adamant straight away. The next point will win this game. They are going to play the Adamant now though, so this Skarmory will take 20 less damage in the coming turn, but first it goes for the Metal Arms to do 20 damage to the Sizzlipede. Now remember, Skarmory is weak to lightning types, not fire types here, as the Macargo is now online as well, and the Center Scorch has been pulled for the Blazers. The Macargo though gets a second energy. They are going with the X speed to reduce the retreat cost of the Sizzlipede to 0, so they can bring it back without having to discard an energy, and they do move that Macargo into the active spot with that Center Scorch also coming online. They did hesitate for a moment there. I had to wonder whether or not they were going to play it, but the Giant Cape going onto the Macargo, moving its health up to 140, and with this Searing Flame doing only 10 damage to the Skarmory. However, it does leave it with that burn status condition that does do an additional 20. The Raiders need to flip their heads, but unfortunately they flip the tails, which means Skarmory will still have this burn. The second Heatran has been pulled for the Raiders. I cannot believe though, that Adamant play, they needed to go for it. That would have ensured they could have gotten a knockout to take this game too. They are going to retreat the Skarmory though. This will cure it of that burn. They move the Magnezone into the active spot, having just taken its first energy as well. The second Macargo being pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes. And they are going to play that Cyrus as well. They're not waiting around to take the Magnezone. They want to go straight for this Skarmory. Again, it will only do 30 damage, but it is the burn coming into play. And with that coming into play, it melts away the Skarmory, and it is going to melt away the Raiders' undefeated streak here in the PokeType League TCG. They have lost their first series here to the Cinnabar Blazes, but we are still going to a Game 3. Now for the Raiders, maybe this could be a good thing. They've got that pressure off their back. They've suffered their first loss. Now they can try and get back to winning matches, as the Ponyta is going into the active spot for this Flamathon deck of the Blazers. It is the Varoom of the Mining Melancholy deck of the Raiders here, but this is our Game 3, and this will all count towards the leaderboard, as once again the Blazers are going first. They've pulled the Houndoom, and they are going to play that Professor's Research that they have in hand to get the X speed. They also get the Iono in case they want to shuffle their hand, as well as the Raiders' hand back into their decks, but they do move the Giant Cape onto this Ponyta here. There isn't a great deal else they can do though in this starting turn, so they do send it over to the Olivine Raiders, who do pull their Giant Cape. They've got a Pokeball and a Professor's Research, so they can start thinning this deck. They've also already got a Revelry. They get the Mawile from the Pokeball, and they play that Professor's Research to get another 2 cards. They get the Registeel, they get the Mars as well, which can cause the opposing side to have to shuffle their hand into their deck and pull the amount of cards to match into the remaining points they have. That always feels like a mouthful, but here we were able to kind of get that out, as the Giant Cape and the first energy go onto the Varoom, and with this Headbutt it can do 10 damage to the Ponyta. It does come back over to the Cinnabar Blazes, who pulled their Paldean Taurus. It does require 3 energy to get online, but this Ponyta only requires the 1 And the Blazes thinking about whether or not they want to put down the Taurus or if they want to play the Iono. They see that they've got 11 cards still remaining in their deck. And they decide to put the Taurus down and go with the Stomp that does not get the heads flip. If it did, it would have done an additional 30 damage, already getting to capitalize on that weakness. So it still does 30 to the Varoom as the Raiders have pulled their second Mawile here. Raiders thinking about how they want to play this. They are going to go with the X speed. This will allow them to retreat the Varoom for no cost. Again, they've got that Revelry in hand. They're going to move the Mawile into the active spot, who with that Iron Beam Breaker does do 20 damage. And there is the Revelry coming online as well, and the Mawile getting its first energy, going on the offensive. It will be able to do 20 damage to this Ponyta, chipping away at its health, but it comes back over to the Cinnabar Blazes. They've got a Rapidash in hand, and they just pulled the second one as we were saying that. That was fantastic timing, as they play the potion to restore 20 health for this Ponyta, back up to 70 health remaining, and they can choose which Rapidash they want to play down. They can either play this the Rapidash from the Genetic Apex, which is 1 energy, but instead they go with the Mythical Island that does require 2 energy for this Rising Lunge. It does 40 damage, but if they flip a heads, it does an additional 60, and on top of that, there is that weakness coming into play. They flip the tails though. This is good for the Raiders. This will not take the Mawile off the board, leaving it with only 10 health remaining though. The Raiders once again pulling an X speed. They get a second energy onto the Revelry. It still requires one more for that spinning drift, so they go with the Iron Beam Breaker, 20 damage onto the Rapidash. They're willing to give up the Mawile here as the Blazers pull their Rocky Helmet, and it is going to be a first energy onto this Paldean Taurus. And that Rising Lunge continues. This is just to maximize their damage, and they do get the heads this time. It's going to do 120 damage to absolutely wipe this Mawile from the board. Potentially some might think that's a little excessive, but it does count towards the leaderboard, so those are crucial points that could determine their place into Victory Road. And we still haven't half the season to go before we get to Victory Road, as it is the second room being pulled for the Olivine Raiders, but the Revelry getting that third energy. It can go for this spinning drift. It does do 70 damage, but it could also prevent it from taking more damage in the next turn. They are going to play the Mars as well, so the Blazers have to shuffle their hand back into their deck. They will pull 2 cards. That's how many more points they require. They get the Pokemon Center Lady and the Potion. Those are actually 2 great cards for the Blazers to get, as the Raiders put down their second Vroom and they put down their second one, while there is still a Registeel in that deck as well. But this spinning drift, 70 damage. Now when the Blazers go on the offensive, they will first, it's going to happen now. The Raiders flip the coin, but they flip a tails. This will mean that Revelry can still take damage in this coming turn. If it had been a heads, all damage done to the Revelry would have been negated, as the second Rapidash is pulled for the Blazers. They do play the Pokemon Center Lady to restore 30 health, and now the Potion to add another 20 health back to that active Rapidash. Although that is a very interesting play, because they could still lose this Rapidash in the coming turn, but they do flip their heads, so they can ensure that this Revelry can't take it out, because they get 120 damage onto the Revelry. The Blazers have taken their second point, 1 more point, and they will not just defeat the Raiders, they will clean sweep them in this series. We have not seen the Raiders look like this all season. They do move the Registeel into the active spot, and they pull their Dawn, as the Blazers are in full control. This is anything this is anything but what we've seen from the Raiders. They have been a dominant side so far. The Blazers pull a Houndour, they do move it onto the bench, and they do get an energy onto the Taurus. They're going to continue with the Rising Lunge. If they get a heads, they get the win, but they get the tails. This will buy them a bit more time to get additional points though, as they do 60 damage to that Registeel. This is terrible for the Raiders. They can use this potion that they have just pulled, and it will restore 20 health for the Registeel, taking it back up to 70 health. They do get a first energy onto it as well, but it does require 3 energy to do 90 damage with that Metal Claw. The Blazers pulling their second Houndour, but they're not worried about that. They're just going to retreat the Rapidash. They're going in with the Taurus to maximize their guaranteed damage. And with this Blaze Tackle doing 100 to the Registeel, and the Blazers have absolutely melted away the metal decks in this contest. not making them look like a top side, but the Raiders are still sitting on the top of the leaderboard, as next round they are going up against the Turffield Ebonies, whereas for the Blazers, they move up into second place, and next round they are going up against the Petalburg Raiders, who they have just jumped. So with that said, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.